Here we are, February 4th, 2017. How are you liking 2017 so far?
Woohoo!
That was an alternative laugh.
Yeah, that was an alt laugh.
Yeah.
The alternative fact is I'm very happy with 2017.
I feel like, so in my profession, we like to diagnose everything, and there's kind of a catch-all diagnosis that we call an adjustment disorder. And that's if you've had a major life event and you're having trouble adjusting, you get about 90 days or 6 months at the outset, to be completely discombobulated and scrambled and depressed and anxious and acting out and whatever. But you're supposed to sort of recalibrate and find your new normal. And I always tell everybody, if you're having a major change in your life, or not even a significant change, then expect to lose your mind for a good 6 weeks, which is kind of the top, top of the curve, halfway in, about 6 weeks. You can sometimes feel like you're completely losing your mind. And if it's a change that you made on purpose, thinking it was going to be good for you, one of the mistakes people make is to kind of say, I shouldn't have done it. Oh my God, it was the biggest mistake I ever made. No, that's just your mind having to readjust and tell you, and it just wants to not do the work. So then usually at about 6 weeks, you start to find strategies that begin to work. And by 90 days or 12 weeks, you should be sort of in your new normal. So I think this week I was looking at the time and I was thinking, I got a week to get my stuff together before I have a full-on adjustment disorder, right? That's what I meant to say, that if by the end of that time you're still really not functioning, then that's when we say you have an adjustment disorder. You're having trouble adjusting, okay? So,
Are there exceptions to the rule?
well,
Like
it's
this
6
time?
months. I mean, sometimes if it's a huge thing, that's just one event, yeah. And depending on how big the event is, you could go 6 months losing your mind.
4 years.
40 years, a lifetime, that's
4 years.
4 years. Yeah, we'll just call that disorder, shall we?
Yeah, but it's not on our end.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I was like, I got a week to get my stuff together. I got a full-on disorder going. But then I realized that we had another significant event. The inauguration was a pretty big event, so I started over. So just so you know, I'm not having a disorder. Besides, I am a mental health professional, so I cannot lose my mind. What's that?
3 months it'll be 420. So that'll be.
There you go.
Solve the problem.
We're saved. I'm 420.
Our disorder.
It's Colorado after all.
If he has the power to revoke that,
Then we're toast, right?
Peter Sager,
Oh wait, that we were toast before. Right. Sorry.
Peter Sager this morning said that.
I mean, we're
Lucy and
Charlie Brown.
Lucy, no,
Oh.
Lucy and Ethel on the chocolate line.
Oh
And
yeah.
that he said, thank you so much, but could you slow it down? He said, besides, it's not chocolate.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, well, the topic for, I really need to be where I can see this. The topic for today, it's funny, I pick these topics. Usually I have some sense halfway into the month. But the last few months I've just got nothing. And Kathy says, give me a topic so I can make the little JPEG. And so I've just been making stuff up, like, let's talk about this. But still, I think it's true. The topic is finding ourselves? Question. And the truth is that that's what we're kind of all here for. We're trying to really live more authentically and really trying to find out what that is and kind of get in the groove with that and find the things that get in the way of that so that we can live lives that feel more congruent and more authentic and just flow a little bit more with reality. And let's face it, we want to suffer less. At least I do want to suffer less. So we're always all about trying to get there, trying to kind of get in that flow or in that stream. So we could probably talk about it every time, or that could be the topic every week, every month. But I had a request also. Well, I'll get to the request later. I did read this really lovely thing from Mark Nepo today, and it happened to be on today, that I'd like to start with regarding becoming, it's kind of, it has to do with becoming who we really are and what we need to basically, at the very bottom of it, do. So, the title is A Set of Inner Doors. The quote by Molly Voss is, "The stuff of our lives doesn't change. It is we who change in relation to it." So he says, whatever our gifts or wounds or life situation, whether we have been married several times or have never been in love, whether we have plenty of money or are sorely in need of more, the core issues of our lives will not go away. There exists for each life on earth a set of inner doors that no one can go through for us. We can change jobs or lovers, travel around the world, become a doctor or lawyer or expert mountain climber, or nobly put our life on hold to care for an ailing mother or father, and when we are done, though the worthy distraction could take years, the last threshold we didn't cross within will be there waiting. There is no substitute for genuine risk. Stranger still is how the very core issues we avoid return, sometimes with different faces, but still we are brought full circle to them again and again. Regardless of how we may try to skip over or sidestep what we need to face, we humbly discover that no other threshold is possible until we use our courage to open the door before us. Perhaps the oldest working truth of self-discovery is that the only way out is through. That we are returned repeatedly to the same circumstance is not always a sign of avoidance, but can mean our work around a certain issue is not done. In my own life, it is not by chance that struggling to adulthood with a domineering and critical mother, I have been thrust again and again into situations with dominant men and women, struggling painfully for their approval and fearing their rejection. For years, I tried to manage the circumstance better, which was like sanding and varnishing the door without ever opening it. I was destined to repeat the pain of rejection, no matter how skillfully I handled it, until I opened the door of self-worth. Until I opened the door of self-worth. Even my calling to be a poet became a distraction that lasted many years. Feeling rejected and insecure at heart, I quietly made a mission of becoming a famous writer, only to find myself one day replaying the issues of approval and rejection 100-fold at the mailbox, as I awaited word from countless critical strangers known as editors. I was stunned and relieved to finally discover myself at the same threshold of loving myself that I had run from years before. The thresholds go nowhere. It is we who, in our readiness and experience, keep coming back, because the soul knows only one way to fulfill itself, and that is to take in what is true. Thus endeth the reading.
Oh, that's good.
Isn't that good? Yeah, it was really encouraging to me too, because I just keep thinking sometimes I'm recycling the same old thoughts all the time, and I get a little embarrassed about that. Like, you're sitting there thinking, come on, you dealt with that like 2.5 years ago. We got it. Come on, what's new? What's fresh? And I think I don't know if I told you guys last time or if it was just, I said this to Kathy. I started School of Life because I felt like my shelves were full of stuff, and I just kept going to the back room and like here and here and here. And now the shelf, like everything's out in the store now. So there's really nothing new. So as much as that sort of embarrasses me maybe a little bit, I have to stop and think of how I learn things, and that is by sort of repetition, application, looking at things from different points of view. So So, and then I got a request to go back to something that I've mentioned many, many times here before. And I want to fit that into this whole idea of of our quest to be authentically who we are. So, whenever I start talking about finding our true self, I always think what a stupid thing that is. I always stop and think as I kind of listen all the way through it. And I just think, you know what's going to happen? We can analyze and understand and study and know all these things. And we can work really hard on all of these things. And you know what's going to happen? When we really start to get to who we really are, it's going to be a process of letting all of that go. Like, yes, I'm an ENFP and a 9 on the Enneagram, and I'm an earth element, and I have a prophetic gifting, and I have, all of these things we talked about last time, like all these ways to define myself. And and I just have this feeling that as I sort of crunch through all of that, I'm going to just go, I'm done thinking about it. I just want to throw pottery and go hiking. That's it. And that's my true self. I already know where I'm going, okay? And in a sense, that's true. The strange irony of being awake human beings is that there's a whole lot that we need to process, but then like eating food, we have to digest it and then eliminate, right? And then just go on with our day. And so I think that School of Life is a lot like that. We're just really zeroing in on some things that could get in our way, but it helps me to remember that it's a necessary process to kind of move through these things so that then we can kind of integrate them and it'll become more of a whole and less of a, oh my gosh, the Enneagram is so immensely important, or oh my gosh, I need to know that I am an artist and I'm going to, all of those things are really important to identify, but then the integration process is kind of pulling them together, and then they sort of become a whole rather than just all these different things we have to kind of keep up with. And so one of the frameworks that I like to use, I use personally and I use professionally, and we've used in here before, is the concept of the 4 quadrants. So here's how I'm wanting to do this, because if you've been around since the beginning, you've been through this little talk, like, 5 or 6 times? But I'm usually doing it on the way somewhere, or I'm doing it all 4 in one session. And so this morning I got this brilliant idea that we have 4, including today, we have 4 sessions left till we take summer break. So I'm going to spend, it's hard for me to commit to something this far in advance, but
Those peas.
yeah, ultimate P. But
We have it on tape, so.
one each, yeah, one each. So first I'm going to give you a little overview, and you might need to help me, or I might ask you to help me just so I can gauge what you're remembering and how much you enjoy this or not. And then I want to start with my favorite love-hate relationship, which is magician, which we have talked about many, many times before. Okay, so what are the 4 quadrants and why do we care? This school of thought has to do with, is based on or founded on some of the concepts that Carl Jung began to think about and write about in the early last century. And talk about a genius, man. That guy is genius. And he didn't necessarily call these things this, so this school of thought is extrapolated from some of these concepts. But if you've heard of the Myers-Briggs type indicator, it's based on these 4 functions, which are based on the work of Carl Jung. So His contention is that we have four basic functions that make up our psyche. And one is being, doing is the other, feeling, and thinking. And so I think his idea was that it's a good idea to have these four functions really up and running really well and balanced so that you're living your life in some kind of coherent flow and maturity. So, but Jung, being who he is, he wasn't just concerned with this. He became fascinated by the whole history of the human race and how cognition and memory and personality and values and community and all those things developed since the early days. And so he spent a lot of his time studying old folklore and stories and images and he realized that there are certain images or characters that were in pretty much every human tribe in the history of humanity. Different characters would show up that seemed to hold certain truths or certain characteristics. And so he's the one that developed this whole idea of archetypes, if you've heard that term before. And an archetype is just like a character that holds the characteristics, like the quintessential characteristics of a very common human thing, force or truth or something. And so to put a character on it, he would take it from folklore or just old stories and find commonalities in all these different cultures. And then to use that character really helps you get a better feel for it. So I'm going to tell you what the archetypes are for these four quadrants, not because they're entities, but because they just help us really understand and get a better grasp on it. Because it's going to mean more to you than if we just talk about being, feeling, doing, and thinking. It's a low level definition. So, so for these four quadrants, when it comes to the being quadrant, he would talk about the king or the queen. So since we're being politically correct here, we're going to call this the sovereign quadrant. So the sovereign is the part of you that is concerned with holding all of your being together and to have a sense of your being, a sense of your purpose, a sense of who you are, a sense of authority, I guess. And we call that's what the king and queen does. It helps us understand what sovereign is if we think about what does a king do, what does a queen do. You know, they have a realm, they rule, and they're in charge and they're responsible. In the feeling quadrant, we have all kinds of stories about lovers. So the archetype for the feeling quadrant is the lover. So think, well, this is probably ancient enough, but think Romeo and Juliet. You know, this is the part of you that can connect with others and can feel things. So the feeling center is, we can personify that with the archetype of the lover. The doing quadrant, the archetype for that is the warrior. If you think about old stories about warriors, which, gosh, there are millions of them. The warrior has to do with implementing, getting things done, defending, standing up for, opposing, fighting for. And in the thinking quadrant, the old stories will use magician or sorcerer usually. I mean, these are the old stories. So When we think about thinking, and I think about thinking a lot, but back when some of these stories were being told, it wasn't a very enlightened age. You know, there's a lot of superstition and just a lot of information we did not have. And so people who were really good thinkers were often, you know, magicians or called, or, you know, they just seemed to be an elite type of person. Okay? Any questions about these 4 things? Yawn if it's old hat. Okay. Okay, so I'm trying to think of like the best way to talk about the magician without just you know, just saying a lot of things. But let's introduce the magician. And I guess I want to answer a few questions. So what does it do? Why do we need it? What does it need? What's good about it? What's not so good? Can you think of any other questions we might want to answer around magician?
How do you make friends with it?
You had to ask that really hard question, didn't you? How to make friends. So first of all, let's just talk about the kind of the, what's it supposed to be for? Like what's it for, what's good about it, and why do we need it are kind of the same, basically the same question. But the magician is there really to help us process data in its basic form, you know, because we're human beings, we're not animals, and we have a prefrontal we have a cortex, you know, which separates us from the animals. So we have the ability to do something with the stimuli that's coming at us. Now, dogs and cats and horses and pigs and all kinds of animals, they have a certain kind of cognition. You know, they take in information, they learn things, and they act. But they don't have the ability to reason or to make meaning other than, how do I survive? How do I get my needs met? But they don't even know how to ask that question. Okay, so the magician is in charge of gathering data, interpreting the data, and taking action. Both in the moment and in a bigger picture, like historically. So this basically is what it is. You know, all of this sensory data, all of these conversations, all this internal data that you have to do something with it, and in order to do that, you have to make some kind of meaning. So the magician is the meaning maker. And unfortunately, for us, the magician doesn't really come online as a really good help to us before the first 5 years of our lives. You know, it's not the dominant part. The center of the magician, like the body center of the magician, of course, is the brain, mind, connection, and particularly with the brain, it is the cerebral cortex. It's ultimately responsible for everything, but the cortex is that part of your mind that can be objective. And unfortunately, it's not online when we're born. We have sensation. That's about it. We have emotion, sensation, and we're learning. But the part of the brain that's active in those early times is a deeper part of the brain. It's the limbic brain, and that doesn't think about itself. Just doesn't. Can't self-reflect. Just sees things, feels things. It makes meaning, but it doesn't get wired in very well or understood very well. So the problem that the magician has is that it's in charge of all these experiences it doesn't know what to do with. And the kid doesn't know what to do with. So,
Well, it's in that action space. It seems like maybe the magician is in charge of identifying actions to take,
yes,
but it's the warrior that decides, or that actually goes and makes those things happen.
I think that might be true.
Okay.
The magician takes in the data and starts with interpretations, and then generates options,
Okay.
and then makes decisions.
Okay.
And then the implementer is
Okay, gotcha.
I think
Gotcha.
is the
Okay.
warrior. Hope?
Tell me if you're going to answer this later. I'm wondering, just based on that, how trustworthy the magician is. Because let's say that I interpret the way you're looking at me as unfriendly, and my action is to leave,
Mm-hmm.
but that was not the case.
Mm-hmm.
How trustworthy is the magician in its interpretation?
That is the question of the day. Yes, how trustworthy is the magician? Yeah, I paid her.
Out of all that money in
I
there.
pay her to lobby me. And that's really, and thank you. I really do appreciate your questions, because I could just talk all day, but I really want to know what's interesting to you. So in a perfect world, like in a perfect human being, the magician should be completely trustworthy. It knows its place. It's not tainted by anything in particular. It can just gather data, interpret the data, give you an output, generate options, help you decide what's the best course of action here. But what I was saying before about it doesn't come online till you're, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, to be able to step back and think objectively. The mind is growing, but it just doesn't have any way to interpret very much except through like pleasure, pain, threat, safety. Those kinds of things are the meaning that gets stored or made in the limbic system. So if there was a human being on the face of the earth that had had an actual perfect upbringing, then those early experiences of safety and reliability and love and needs being met and listened to and being seen and reflected appropriately, then the magician would be very trustworthy, would never really let you down. But unfortunately, we learn some things when we're growing up that we have these basic needs and we try to get them met, but we're met with things that either we don't expect, things that shock us, things that hurt us, or things that leave us high and dry. And so there is meaning that gets made in this very childlike sort of way. And it almost makes a structure, a scaffold, that when your cerebral cortex comes online, then that scaffold or maybe the filters that your limbic system made for taking in data, it's already biased. There's certain ideas that aren't even really ideas. They're sort of feelings or knowings or gut instincts about who we are and whether we're safe or not and whether we're okay or not. That's already established. But the kid can't say, yes, I have a basic ontological insecurity due to the emotional neglect that I suffered as a child. It's not going to tell you that. It's just going to act that out. Okay, so most of us in this room have certain, we call them cognitive filters, that are unconscious and in place. And so we'd love to be able to clearly receive data, but we don't. It's already pre-selected. You know, it already just comes in. It's by habit. And we don't even notice that we don't notice things. We don't even notice already the data is being filtered in some way. Then there are more filters in the interpretation phase. We don't even know that we're locked into certain ways of seeing things and certain ways of responding to the data because we never feel safe, or we never feel valued, or we never feel, or we don't have this sense that we're capable. So these kind of cognitive filters, or these meaning filters, interfere with the interpretation too. And so obviously, it's going to hamper whatever actions that we take or choices that we make. And so no one knows, you know, there aren't like little alarms that go off when meaning is being made by a child. Someone should design that and install it. And parents will try to figure out, what's my kid learning? Like if they don't get in the brownie troop, then she's going to believe that she's not good enough. Well, you don't know that for sure. Maybe that's what you learned, but you don't know what a child is learning at any given moment emotionally, right? So we try to fix it, but most of the time our fixes just get in the way and give them different filters than we think that we're getting, because we're trying to all manage it, you know? Anyway, so we become adults with a relatively functional or dysfunctional magician. And because we're Americans, and because we're all pretty much white, and because we live in the 21st century, our whole culture is oriented toward the magician. So I think that it would be an interesting study to look at different cultures and different, you know, eras of history to realize which function really was in charge in history, you know, and then what that did to people. But we are in the 21st century, and we are all about information. The magician wants information. So I'm going to switch to that before I start talking about the 21st century. But maybe I'll finish answering the question first, you guys. Okay, so do you need any more on that? Like, it's questionable, and it gets us in trouble. But we value it maybe the most of all of these, is my point. Okay? So so we got kind of what does it do? Why do we need it? Let's answer the question, what does it need? Which I was already answering before I asked the question. The first thing is information. It needs data in order to do its job. What else do you think that the magician needs or wants?
A problem to solve?
Yes. Challenge, a problem to solve. Any other ideas? Control. Yes. Ding, ding, ding. The magician wants control. And I don't know if that's been true in the history of the world, but certainly for now. If the magician is going to advise us appropriately, you know, it wants us to be safe. I mean, if you think about it, you're talking about it as an entity. It's not really an entity, but we're creatures that need to feel safe, and in order to feel safe, we kind of need to to feel like things are predictable or understandable, because that gives us a sense of control, right? So magician wants control. Linda.
Yeah, what you just said makes more sense to me than that question, because you just said what it wants is control. So that those things seem to be what it wants. It's not necessarily what it needs, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Because I think when I think about how do I make friends with my magician, it's not by giving the magician more information or more problems to solve or more control. It's actually giving it validation and acceptance of, seeing that it has a purpose and then it can move. But it doesn't move until
Yes, that's really good. So there is a distinction between what does the magician want and what does the magician need, okay, which is a really important distinction. Because when your thinker is dysfunctional, it's wanting all kinds of things. It wants more information. It wants a problem to solve. It wants control. It wants to figure things out. It wants understanding. Yeah. It wants understanding and it wants predictability, which is kind of the same thing as certainty. Because it just doesn't want to, he doesn't want us to feel bad. We don't like feeling bad and we don't like feeling insecure. So in an effort to help, if you want to put it that way, we're really personalizing this now. If we can understand something, if we can predict something, and we can sort of lock it down, then we can ease up a little bit because this makes sense. Oh yeah, I saw this before, or here, and then that certainty or those concepts or those truths or those what is it called in science? Laws of physics or certain things that are true. We can put them in categories so that we're not feeling so bewildered and overwhelmed all the time. So that's basically what it wants. But I want you to pay particular attention to this whole idea of control, because now we'll go back to us being in the 21st century, American, white people. We have gotten so enamored with modern thinking and knowing. So like the last 500 years, basically, since the Enlightenment, was, oh my gosh, science. Oh my goodness, knowledge. The last 500 years brought us out basically of the dark and Middle Ages, where everything was kind of superstitious and authoritarian power and things like that. Now we have observable facts, we have science, we have, thank goodness, we're not just being tossed to and fro with all these weird things. We understand more. And so at the last 100 years or so, we've come to expect and trust our thinking more than any of the other functions. Now, there are exceptions to this rule, of course. There are people who just aren't going to think or don't value that. But as a culture, I think we are inundated with thoughts and facts and concepts and evidence. And when we have a problem to solve, then we want to give it to the best part of us that can solve the problem. So this is how we use the 4 quadrants, is when we're given a challenge, who's going to take the ball and run with it? And we have lost the connection with a lot of these other parts of us. And so our go-to is magician. Let magician handle it. Let's figure it out. Let's get opinions. Let's get information. And we never stop to think that our thinker might be impaired in some ways. So, anything else? This is old material. Okay. next question then is, what's good about it? Well, we pretty much discussed that. But when we talk about the different quadrants, I got to ask this question too. That's just for me, so I won't forget. What's good about it? When we think about the different archetypes, the different quadrants, we think about them in terms of being inflated, overinflated or underinflated, you know, so because we talked about generally what it's good for, what it's there for, but we can make mistakes with it, or we can be unhealthy in it in kind of opposite directions. So where do you want to start? Over or under? If you have an overinflated magician or an under-functioning magician? Over. The magician can go bad in lots of ways. So an overinflated, so a magician that is got too much power or is given too many jobs to do, that's what we mean by it. So when it's overinflated, can you think of what that might look like? What would be what would be like a characteristic?
Like a sorcerer, or
But what do you mean by the sorcerer?
it's where the magician gets overinflated and
Uh-huh.
starts to try to control things through magic and make things happen with the
Yeah.
mind.
So what would you call that? Manipulation or BSing or
No.
misleading people or
Hyperthink.
yeah,
King disease.
thinking disease, right? If your thinker is unhealthy and overworking, you have thinking disease. I call it hyperthink. Kathy calls it crazy brain, which is my favorite. And you probably know what that feels like, right? Crazy brain. You just start generating all kinds of ideas, and they're just coming one right after another. Or you've got 3 or 4 of them, and you're just circling around each of them, and you're spending all kinds of mental BTUs swirling and spinning and alternating and on the other handing and looking up information and trusting this person and trusting that person and not ever solving the problem. So one of the problems with an overinflated magician is that it becomes a disease. The thing that was supposed to serve the rest of you and help solve your problems is actually becoming the disease. So the cure, in a sense, becomes worse than the disease. That makes sense? And thinking that it can solve any problem. Some problems are not to be understood. They're just, and if you try, you might get some semblance.
None of your stuff.
No one in this room. Some poor souls out there. What else? Sometimes.
Survey, like, sometimes I ask a whole bunch of people.
Oh yeah. So gathering, endless gathering. Endless gathering and never knowing. What were we going to say, Susie?
I was gonna say obsessive.
Yeah.
Legalistic.
Yes, obsessive. And legalism, like rule following. But it's kind of a rigidity. That's the word I was looking for. Rigidity. and yeah, you keep bumping into these false kind of or arbitrary rules because you're trying to bring some sense out of this crazy brain thing. So you have these arbitrary rules that you're just bounce off all the walls of rigidity, you know, and you just keep circling, 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 and you kind of get caught in your own box. So yes, thinking boxes.
So the rest of you gets paralyzed and can't take any action.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. And raise your hand if you understand this, you know. You can't get anywhere because you're just bouncing around, or you're circling, or you're just obsessing about some particular thought or fear or something, and you're trying to solve it, but you can't because you keep circling around the same drain, but you can't not go there because then you feel like you're out of options. You know what I'm saying? So this thinking disease, you know when you have it, when the spinning and the circling and the fear and the bouncing around is taking up so much time and generating so many anxious or depressed feelings, and you're not solving your problem, or you're just circling around the same problem, the I suck problem or the something bad is going to happen problem. Those are the only two problems in the world. And so when you have the thinking disease, you either have to come to one of those two things. And if that's the only place you go, then you know that you've got the disease. Does that make sense? But you also know if you've got the disease because you can't stop doing it. Because you have this feeling, if I don't keep trying to solve this problem, then I'm screwed. There's no hope for me. There's no help for me. This is how people commit suicide. Because they get the thinking disease and it just starts spinning, and then it goes to I suckville, and there's no way outville, and they don't realize that there might be other faculties because they've only been taught to trust this one, and it's corrupt. It's broken, or it's wounded, or something. Yes?
So I obviously relate to this hypervigilance, crazy monkey brain. But what I'm wondering is part of the data that feeds the magician the data received by the magician? And what I mean by that is, while all of this is going on, there's another process that goes on that's watching it.
Oh yeah, there's so many layers, yes.
And that's saying, this is crazy brain.
Yes, so you're asking about an observer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's back to what does it need, what helps. So, but yes, but you can have several layers of crazy brain too, which I am the world champion layers of crazy brain. So, I can feel that one, and then just like, God, what is the matter with you? Look at you. You're just obsessing, completely obsessing. Yeah, well, I've always been an obsessor, and maybe, so I'm just like stacking layers of obsession on top of the whatever it was in the beginning to start. So you can have you could be a black belt in overthinking.
I was going to say paranoia.
Yeah, yeah.
Overreacting.
Yes. Paranoia. And overreacting. Because, you can get really, you can go really extreme on these kinds of things. If your brain is a normal brain, obviously there are psychosis and different types of mental disorders that are more organic than thinking diseases, but definitely all the common neuroses, it's a thinking disease. And paranoia, there's a certain kind of paranoia that is an extreme sort of circular, and with the emotional input of the always feeling at threat, and then these filters that get set in place, or maybe have been in place, that, oh my gosh, this is about me, or everyone hates me, or everything's against me, or the whole world is working against me. Paranoia is kind of one of those. So this is the over-functioning magician. And if you, it just helps to kind of know that. So if these are so familiar. If you can remember, oh wait, my magician is over functioning and is sick right now, then we have options. Because the biggest thing, and I keep standing here stomping my foot and saying, we are married to this magician. We love the magician the most. We trust the magician the most. And our absolute faith in its ability to save us is what makes us sick. And it's what keeps this going. Because it never occurs to us to go, you know, that's a little cuckoo. And maybe I'm not quite thinking straight. And I'm happy that I can catch myself now in these things. And I did that a while ago. I think I might have mentioned this to you last time. I had a little meltdown around things, and I just was full of fears, and all my information was just like infused with disaster. And I was standing there talking to Ted, and started snowballing and started shouting and started screaming. And he was like, calm down. And then I was like, oh no, because you just don't understand. You just don't understand. And I just kind of, in the middle of my meltdown, there was this little observer back there going, you know that's a little extreme, right? And are you hearing the things that you're saying? You're saying things that you don't even believe, right? And I was so happy that came on, that was built in there. So I finally just was like, I'm just going to stop talking now and have a drink and watch Netflix.
Feeling center contributes to that though, because can't we sometimes have a feeling that then we turn into a thought and then we get stuck in the cycle?
Yeah, the question is, can feelings, trigger these kinds of thoughts? And yes, I think they can. I think they're emotional sensations that happen. But I'm kind of a cognitive therapist, so I lean on the side of, we feel things because we believe certain things. And so I don't know that that's 100% true. I think you can have just pure emotions. But I guess I lean toward the idea that under every feeling, if we could kind of get to the bottom of it, is some sort of belief.
Isn't the magician trying to protect the feelings?
Yeah, always, but sometimes, or solve the feelings, but it both creates and then tries to fix the problem, in some ways. So I'll have to think about that. Do you have anything more you want to say about, because you...
I don't know, I've done a lot of personal work recently, and sometimes when I get to a point where I'm like, aha, then I get this wave of sadness that follows it. And I don't know what the thoughts are that are behind that. I don't know if there are thoughts behind it. Like, I can't really identify what the thoughts are sometimes, but it just feels like grief.
Yeah.
It just feels like, and I think there are some...
Yeah, I think there's some primal emotional states, and I think grief is one of them. Loss is one of them.
That the magician's not creating in order
Right.
to
Yeah.
resolve.
Something. Yeah. Like we have loss is something that we feel in the body and in the brain. It's a perception that we have, and animals experience loss, and so there may be some really primal kinds of emotional states that aren't necessarily connected to meaning that's been made from them.
But then doesn't the magician kind of jump on that and say, well, you lost that, you're never going to have...
Oh yeah, it creates all kinds of stories. That's its job, is to create narrative and make sense out of things, make meaning out of things. And so it could make 100 different stories. It could make some great stories too. It's not always all bad. But yeah, it's really an infinite amount of cognition, narrative, stories that can be made out of any one piece of data. And it's always sorting it. So certain experiences that are in memory help you look at things a certain way, and then new data that comes in, you select it as, oh yeah, it fits in this bin, or no, that's different, we need another category. You know what I'm saying? So it's changing the brain all the time. and sifting through and crunching data all the time.
I was just wondering with what Don mentioned about getting that aha moment. It's almost like when the magician is trying to solve that problem, but then you get that, you do get some kind of answer, but it usually requires the magician to calm. And sometimes I think, to me, that feels almost like a loss. Like, it's not busy anymore. It's like, now what do I do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
I wonder if
possible. The other thing is that could be happening in these moments is that when you finally just get an aha, or you satisfy the magician, or you surprise it or startle it somehow, and it quits, then the lover energy comes in, and you just are filled with emotion, the sensation of emotion. That could just flat out be relief, or I don't know, joy or grief. Yeah, that either you don't know the answer, or yeah, I think I just am feeling what it felt like to lose or to. So it's a good question.
I think in my system, that aha moment comes more for me in the thinking quadrant, and the magician is the one that says, "Oh, aha, data," and then starts rolling it.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about aha, because I think, well, aha just doesn't fit. So aha is a moment of revelation of some sort, right? Of realization or coming to clarity of some sort. And I think you have levels of that too. So for sure, if you're highly functioning in the way the magician is supposed to function, like you're solving a problem and you're thinking creatively about it, and you're online and you're doing fine, and you're not stumbling over your filters, or it's not about you, it's not, the level of threat is pretty low, then aha can be just a wonderful experience and part of a healthy magician function, because you're learning stuff and it feels good. And but when you're sick, and this happens a lot when you're working on a piece of work, in therapy or something, and you're just bumping up against some really bad belief that you have, and it dissolves, or you allow something else in, or some aha realization happens. It's almost like the magician takes a breath, like, okay, fine. And then you let in this wave of emotional energy that could be many different things. So it could just be that they quit for once in their freaking life, just quit. Yeah.
So what category would this fit in? Like, I guess when you give a shitter breaks, and you just don't even want to try to figure it out anymore. Is that just exhaustion? That's from the
So
over?
let's switch. That's under.
Is it on this?
It's under. Although sometimes it's the right thing that you give a shitter breaks. Is that what you call it? I like that. I've never heard that before.
That's another way to put it.
Give a shitter break. My give a shitter broke. Or looked at my bag, don't got any more.
Those, yeah.
So let's switch over to what is it like to be for your magician to under function. And so I think some of that is just mental exhaustion. But there's also, what else? How else would you? Ignorance. Intentional ignorance.
How about resignation or helplessness?
Yep. Overwhelm.
Always giving yourself over to authority, or like they must know better.
Yeah.
They know more than me.
What do you call that? Subjugation. Submission, subjugation. Yeah, like I can't figure this out. I'm just to take so-and-so's word for it. Or, it's just, it causes too much dissonance. And, gosh, we are in that, right? We are in that soup right now. There's so many different kinds of ideas, opinions, facts that and sources that, and we don't like the dissonance, and our magician gets tired, or we just kind of go, well, we used to say, the Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it. Like the end. This is the box I'm going to live in. If it doesn't fit under these guidelines, then I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not going to entertain it. And there's lots of little boxes we put ourselves in. I'm only going to listen to so-and-so, or I'm only going to, this person seems smarter than me, so I trust them on everything. And so refusing to struggle and to, shut down on those things or put ourselves in boxes. Were you going to say something?
Well, it's like the magician creates a structure and then operates off of that structure. So he decides, okay, with this thing, I'm only going to ever follow these pathways and think these things.
Mm-hmm.
And once it sets it, then it just like comes offline and is like, oh, we're just going to
Phew.
box and
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Really limits the data that comes in and limits the interpretations of the data. So you can go the other direction too, where you have no way to filter anything, and you're sort of interpreting everything through all these different lenses. So it's necessary to have some structure and some kind of rules to follow. Otherwise, you just get lost in this soup of meaning and cognition and ideas. So it's important, but one of the ways it underfunctions, I guess, is to just say, I've had enough. I'm done. I can't handle that. And I think I say that 5 times a day. I can't go there, because it feels overwhelming.
Do you think that a piece of the extra overwhelming right now, though, is because some of us have a halfway decent magician on certain things, and everything's getting violated in the outside world, and so we're like, how could you think that, or how can you hear these alternative facts, and all these things, it's some of it is the good part of us.
Yeah.
That is really wrestling, I guess, just being taxed in such a hard way. Our thinky, wise, and I know that's sovereign, but this part is getting extra overloaded.
Yeah, it is getting extra over. Yeah.
Because there's a little piece that is balanced in there.
Yeah.
That's getting somehow thrown off kilter.
Yeah.
It just made me think about how tiring that is.
Yeah. And we are talking about the magician by itself without connection to the rest. We need everything. And so when the magician is the amoeba that ate New York, what I'm saying, with it loses connection with all the other ways of knowing that we have, then it has to make rules for itself, and it's its own authority. And there's no connection to wisdom. There's no connection to what's larger than ourselves. It's lost its moorings. And so then anything could be true. Anything could be worthwhile. And so you're all the time spinning and swirling and trying on new things, but it has no grounding or no centering in what's real or what's organic or what's, true. Yeah.
I would just agree with that. And also, I was thinking about the concept of going tilt.
Yeah.
My
Yeah,
grandson
tilt,
likes to
that's a
ask
good one.
Siri a lot of inane questions. And every once in a while, Siri says, I don't know what you're talking, I can't answer that, or
Yeah.
whatever. You expect the phone to start smoking.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that right now, the collective magician is going tilt to some extent. But I was also wondering, in terms of the undercategory, would you put self-medication and numbing?
Yes. Thank you. Until some of these are a function of overfunctioning, so when we go tilt, it's usually, and we can swing back and forth between overfunctioning and underfunctioning. But yes, numbing out, compartmentalizing.
Paralyzation.
Yep. Paralysis. These are underinflated magician things. So the numbing out is just sort of like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to have to think about it. I just want to I just want to play on my computer. When you shouldn't, when you really need to be sifting through some things. Denial. Yeah. 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 So obvious. And compartmentalizing, we need to do that anyway. I think there's just so much stuff we have to, so a certain amount of compartmentalizing is necessary. However, there are lots of people, this is one of my pet peeves because I like to be a big picture thinker and I like to integrate all the time. Makes me tired sometimes, but when I see people who say they believe this thing and then they also believe this thing and they absolutely cannot exist on the same plane and they haven't even noticed how ridiculous they're being, because they've compartmentalized their beliefs, or their theories or their ideas. They just put it in this little silo and then they put this in this little silo and they don't have a big enough observer to go, hold on, that's, I don't know if you have examples you'd like to mention. Well, yeah, okay, so the abortion issue, which is a hard one for me because I can't imagine doing it. I can't. And I've had experiences with, anyway, I have a sensorial objection to the whole thing that goes beyond, in a physical, revulsion toward the whole idea that goes beyond ideology. And so we have this thing in our country where, and I respect it, that it's not okay. What does it mean that we're willing to sacrifice? What does it mean that we don't know where life begins and where it doesn't begin, and we decide? Because the miracle of conception and gestation and birth and life, holy cow, how can you decide where it starts and where it doesn't and when it's okay and when it's not? I don't get that. So I get the strong emotions about that. But then to hold on to that without thinking or knowing or being willing to hear stories of people who are actually in horrible circumstances, desperate places, and needing to make terrible choices. And to make that choice means you go to jail? That doesn't make any sense. And unless you think on the whole spectrum of that issue, then you have to put, you put things in category and you shut off your thinking because it's too emotional, it's too nuanced, it's too important, it's too hard to figure out, and we can't control it. We can't really, it's not as cut and dried as we want it to be. So we don't have to agonize about it because it's agony inducing for everyone. So that's just a pretty extreme example. So it's only unhealthy when you pick one thing or the other thing and then go, I'm for this, I don't want to hear anymore, I don't want to see anymore, and I don't want anybody to tell me anything more because it's too scary, too hard to integrate. So, and that's a very powerful extreme example. But we do this all the time. So that's what hypocrisy is, basically. Being fully convinced of this thing over here and then this thing over here and not realizing that they're kind of in conflict. And you haven't done the work to integrate them or to sort of get a better, synthesize and it's only getting more pronounced in our culture because partly as a reaction to overthinking. We're overwhelmed, so we got to do something. So we just shut things down. We cut off information. Oversimplify. Thank you. Okay, so that's over and under. What's good, what's bad? Oh, you okay with that? Am I erasing this?
What goes in the middle?
Well, we started.
Making friends with them.
I go from here to here to
Yeah. Most of us are like, shoom, shoom. Yep, you go up on the fulcrum. So, yeah, in between, it's not exactly in between, but it is just remember what it's for. It's to serve a higher purpose, and it's for our benefit. And so if you're over functioning and under functioning, then you know you've sort of you need some other faculties kind of to help you here. But you got to know that there are some. So what's good, what's bad? We did that. Check. Sometimes don't you get tired of listening to me talk? I just looked at the clock. We have like 17 minutes.
I think we kind of experienced through all of that what it feels like, I think.
Yeah.
We've kind of
Yeah. So
experienced that.
what's good about it is how does it feel? So think about, I want you to just think about when you were brilliant. Think about a time when you experienced aha, or you had a great idea, or you figured something out. Can you just think about it for a second? When your thinker is healthy and functioning, how does it feel?
Calming.
Can feel calming, yeah. Yeah, like that calm clarity. Is that what you mean?
Or exciting, like you want to bounce off the walls.
Or exciting, yeah. It could just be, oh my God, I saw the whole thing, you know?
It's validated.
Yeah, it feels kind of validated. I better write these down. Exciting. Excited. I think my strongest faculty is magician. And School of Life is all about me being in my magician. And it feels great. It just feels great. I love it. Anybody who loves public speaking, they will say the same thing. God, and I was even said to Ted when we were driving up here, I think, it makes me really believe there's God. Really makes me because I'm like, I got nothing. I got nothing the whole week. I got nothing last night. I got nothing this morning. I sit down to I read a little bit of Mark Nepo. I start just opening the door and whoosh, there it comes. And then I come up here and I get to just go, bleh! And I love it. It feels wonderful when your magician is working. Even when it's working bad, sometimes it feels good. Because mine is not always working. Hopeful, yeah. Yeah, because it's getting the job done. Hopeful, yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
you feel like
Settled or correct, yeah. Yeah. So, but when it's working and you're problem solving, there's a certain sort of synapses firing. That's what I want you to get, because part of what helps us to live in the four quadrants is to realize what it feels like, what that pure energy feels like. And it's the energy it's just mental energy, basically. It's not anything spooky or weird, but it's when you're in a high functioning magician period, it just has a certain flow to it. It feels easy. It feels brilliant. It feels like amazing. You know, the magician was the one who could just wave the magic wand and something would happen. That's why they call it the magician, because thinking when it's serving its purpose and when it's healthy, it sort of feels almost like magic. Like, oh, I had this great idea. Oh, I can see how we can do that. Or what we really need is some way to make the lock work this way, but not that way. And, oh, I get it. You know, that kind of aha, that brilliant, that's how it feels. So obviously you can have mania, which you feel that way all the time, but you're lost your ability to, but that would be definitely overinflated. But that spark and that mental flexibility and that high moving energy and that sense of sort of brilliance or magic, that's what a healthy magician feels like. Yeah.
Is right, being right or feeling right always necessarily healthy?
No, we're just talking about when it is healthy, like when you're like, oh, this is it. This is right. This feels right. You know, right? Is that what you meant by it? Or were you just saying that you're right all the time?
Personally speaking,
Personally.
it's more like, huh, I was right, you were wrong.
Oh,
That feels good.
And it feels healthy.
yeah.
And that's the danger.
And let's move on. No, that's fine. No, there's a certain feeling. Yeah, I was, and I think you followed up with validated, right? So, no.
Well, and I know we're gonna get into this as we go on through the months. Again, though, as much as that's a great, healthy feeling magician, but it still has to get integrated, right?
Yes.
With everything else.
Yeah, we're just hanging out in
Yeah,
space here.
okay.
So, I just want you to be able to recognize it when it's there, and when it's functioning badly, it feels terrible. It's scary. It's exhausting. It feels like you just feel like you're grinding, you know, when it's not working. And when you feel like you want to just lay your head down on the table, that's when you know.
Well, it's
Okay.
circular. Like
Yeah, it's just, and it can start to feel really hopeless. I have been in really hopeless places because I'm just boxed in. I'm just circling, and I have these filters that only get reconfirmed all the time. I suck. Here's how I suck. Here's the 500,000 ways that I suck. And I sure wish I didn't suck. And I wonder how I can fix myself so I don't suck anymore. So let's go down that, that kind of makes me want to slit my throat just thinking about it. So what does it feel like? Now, here's a big question. Of course, we have 5 minutes. What does it need, and how can we make? Are you trying to raise your hand?
Well, I just was, as you were talking about these things of how it feels when it's working correctly, I realized that when I can help magicians see those things, like I can validate, even if it's just overthinking, I can go, yeah, I can see why you're thinking all these things. There are reasons for all these crazy ideas you have. Then it settles a little bit. So I can give it
Validating, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so can we add that to what does the magician mean, how to make sense with it? How to make friends with it. Is that where you were headed with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it needs validating. It needs me to be calmer so it can
Yeah.
calm.
So how to make friends, I call validation vitamin V. Validation actually, I think, comes from the sovereign, but we can talk about that when we get to sovereign. But to some knowledge or some sense that I get how you're thinking, or I understand that, or if I believed those things, that's exactly how I would feel too. That it seems to be a pivotal thing that helps the magician pivot. Validation. Like, you're not crazy. Maybe you are, but I can see how you got there, Validation is really important. And it, like I said, I think it comes from the sovereign. Sovereign is the one who kind of understands things, who does synthesize and integrate and understands purpose and is rooted and grounded in itself and into the spiritual, or what's larger than itself. And so we need help from that. We need some kind of, something. And there's that part of us that's there that we can draw on. So validation is a big one. Anything else you can think of that magician needs? Yeah, some kind of truth or truthiness. No. And so whatever that means to you. I mean, I think truth is really a hard concept these days. It's really, really a hard concept. However, that doesn't mean there isn't truth. You know what I'm saying? And it's not just what everybody thinks is true, although there are a gazillion constructs around what is truth. But so I'm just going to put that there. That I'm just going to put that there. Anything you want to say about that?
Integration.
Yeah, it needs, and yeah. So, yes, quiet. Whoops. Quiet.
I think this might have to do with integration too, but some kind of grace that I'm solving the problem today and it's good. And not going too far like, oh, but what if it's bad tomorrow? Like there's some kind of grace that I'm doing the best I can with my information, but maybe that's integrating to something else that it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, I think let's just call it grace. I mean, I think you're articulating it really well, and there's lots of meanings to the word grace, but the way that I don't know what a better word to use. Not like it's not a bad word, but it's some sense that, you know what, you're okay, you're doing okay. It's not the end of the world. You're figuring it out. Good job. It's close to validation. Yeah. Pardon? Permission. Yeah. 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 Let's get back to the quiet thing for a second. If we could only give it one thing, right now especially, quiet. And how do you get quiet magician? You know, how do you get a quiet magician? What's that?
What did you say?
Put a sock in it.
I was thinking meditation.
Yes.
But how do you quiet it without going under?
Oh, well, that's okay. I mean, like, it's different than under. Quiet is just rest, basically. Yeah. So I don't know, like, meditation doesn't lead to under functioning. Meditation is basically, actually, what the mind and the brain, we're talking about the mind-brain. So when it's over-functioning, it needs to rest, but we don't know how to rest it. So meditation is probably the best thing, except we suck at it because we're diseased already, you know? So you can keep trying, but there are other things that can bring quiet to the mind. And so let's talk about those. Meditation, and learn to meditate. Meditate every day. Meditate 20 minutes every day, twice a day, if you can, centering prayer, whatever you call meditation, and you will heal your brain and your mind. The end. That is my truth.
Let's go.
And I'm sticking to it. Sticking to it.
Also movement and exercise.
Yes. So in the category of quiet, what we want is to stop it from over-functioning. We want to give it rest. So if we're good at clearing the mind, then clear it. If we want to meditate, then meditate. But if you can't, then do something physical. Take a walk, go for a hike, take a breath, do some jumping jacks, do some yoga, do something. Because what we're doing is, so over-functioning magicians happening right here, right here, right here. And there are other parts of the brain. And so if we can give our attention to other parts of the brain, it lets this part rest because, we're being directed in other parts of the brain. So to quit thinking, you have to think about not thinking, which only just makes it worse sometimes. But if you just do something else to jump out of those particular pathways, then it does the same thing, and this rests and resets. So physical is the best. Do something. Even if you can't move, then focus on your senses. All the little tools I've been throwing at you for years.
Distraction?
Yeah, distraction, but not necessarily a mental distraction, or a different kind of mental distraction. So if you're like fixated on the news, or if you're studying, or you're writing a dissertation or something, and you need a break, then maybe you need a story something on the other part of your brain, some other part of your brain, some kind of story you can get lost in, or an activity, or yes. The other way to do it is to just make something, create something. And this will, I guarantee you, will get, well, I can't guarantee you that because you can overthink art. I can't quite do that, but because I can overthink anything. But to do something creative that is not mental. So build a birdhouse,
So what you're kind of doing is getting another quadrant going.
Either another quadrant or another part of the brain, I guess, too, because I don't know where art fits in. I think you can have art in all the quadrants, creativity, but, get another part of the,
I think when we were talking about physical, I was thinking that might be needing to get the warrior going.
Yeah. Take action, do something.
Meditating's moving into sovereign,
Yeah.
art might be moving into human.
Clean the closet, do something else. Yeah.
I'm not sure how to put this into words. I hope you can help me, but it's doing something for someone else. So, placing something else, like another need in between you and the broken thinker.
Yeah, so like have an outside focus,
Or
external
like,
focus.
I think of service.
Service, yeah, great. That's great. Anything that gets you out of your own head and your own
Which I
swirl.
can also overthink.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But at least there's an opportunity there.
Yeah. Yeah. Taking action of any kind helps me. So what else does anything else? Okay, never mind. So let's just, a few words about making friends here. We make friends through the sovereign, and that just means, for our purposes now, we'll get into that in May, but what the magician needs ultimately is blessing. And this is in the quadrant of the sovereign. So blessing is just, I see you, I get it, thank you. I hear you. Yep, you're tired. You've worked so hard. Thank you. Oh, Mr. Critic, you have been online for 3 months now and you're working so hard to keep me safe. Thank you. And shut the fuck up. But that sense of it's understanding its purpose, that part of you is trying to do a good work. Maybe badly, maybe brilliantly, but when you can get outside of the problem it's trying to solve and just say, you have been trying to solve that problem for a long time, thank you. Blessing is probably how to begin to make friends with your exhausted or over-functioning or under-functioning magician, is just realize it's all part of the whole, and it all belongs. You can't cut things off and banish things. You can't get rid of it. Every part of you belongs at the table. So seeing that who you really are is big enough to encompass and love and bless all of the things, even the really dysfunctional, even the hurtful, even the self-destructive things can better heal through compassion and love than cutting it off and stuffing it in the closet, or trying to shame it to death.
I haven't heard you use the word for the sovereign. You said the blessing comes from the sovereign, and the word that just came to mind as you were talking is host, to show hospitality to all the parts.
Yeah.
But as in any healthy relationship amongst the quadrants, there has to be not only that blessing but a boundary, and then the willingness to, in that healthy space, give and take. So like flow with that,
Mm-hmm.
are just things that come to my mind when you talk about
Mm-hmm.
blessing.
Yeah, I think that,
making friends.
yeah, you're talking about a lot of the functions of the sovereign. To hold the space, to guard this, to know what the space is, what the boundaries of the space, and to have the confidence that everything belongs and everything is working toward, has the same kind of goals underneath it all, and that we are not without resources. We're plugged in to the spiritual. We're plugged into God. We're plugged into this, to the resources that are beyond us. That's the best part of the sovereign. And so to remember that and to be able to give that to yourself is the best way to, the best attitude to have to make friends with yourself. Yeah.
It seems like kind of making friends and what does it need, but what it gives you, and I think I read this in Aurora this week, but it gives you like a new way to see.
Yeah.
Like the gift that it gives is the ability to see with clarity. You're given new eyes, and that way you can actually think.
Yeah.
That clarity, but
Yeah.
you actually, I think we end up seeing differently.
Yeah. Yeah. We want to get that part of you healthy enough or refreshed enough that it can get a different perspective or be connected enough to the core to then have a correct filter and to then enhance its ability to serve the whole system, so when you see bigger and you see a different perspective and you see more clearly and you expand what you're seeing, then you're feeding that part of you to be able to serve better, equipping you better. Is that kind of what you were saying? Or yeah. Okay, it's after 11, so you can leave if you need to. If you want to ask more questions, I'm fine, but I should have a summary statement. Do you have any? Kathy,
No, I did
help
have
me,
one
help
thing.
me.
Thank
me
you,
off
Phyllis.
I have to land, I have to land. No,
No, but I was thinking, Phyllis and I talked about this briefly yesterday, and I just wanted to kind of extend the invite. I'm
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
start it, I'm gonna get it going tomorrow, but I'm starting this little secret, I'm not gonna do closed, because I don't want the world to find it. But, an STP group, it's called Surviving This Presidency,